The August sun had drained the small town of Red Rock, Arizona, of its usual warmth, leaving a dry, almost tangible heat pressing against the skin. Dust clung to the soles of shoes and to the back of necks, and the air shimmered like a mirage over the cracked asphalt. In the Hargrove backyard, 5-year-old Ellie chased the last fireflies of the evening, her giggles piercing the heavy quiet like tiny silver bells. She was barefoot, her tiny blue dress flapping in the heat, her golden curls catching what little light remained. Her mother Mara had been inside, pouring herself a tall glass of iced tea, the condensation dripping slowly onto the counter. She could hear the laughter from the yard and smiled, until a sudden piercing scream shattered the late afternoon calm. It was brief, sharp, almost mechanical in its terror, yet not a scream she recognized from her daughter. Mara's heart stopped. She dropped the glass, the ice shattering against the counter with a metallic clang, and bolted toward the back door. Ellie was gone. The yard was empty. The fireflies flickered helplessly around the barn, but there was no child chasing them. No footprints, save for the faint dust prints near the edge of the old wooden barn. Mara's eyes immediately fell on the first sign of something terribly wrong. A single blue sandal, lying on its side, half buried in the reddish dirt. Her stomach twisted, her throat closing as a cold sweat broke over her skin. "Ellie," she screamed, her voice raw and breaking. Her voice bounced off the old barn walls and across the dry fields. The wind carried only the faint rustle of the dying corn stalks and the occasional crow's caw in reply. She ran in a wide circle around the barn, calling the child's name, her voice becoming increasingly frantic, cracking with fear. Her legs burned as adrenaline pushed her forward, and with each passing second, a deep, suffocating panic began to nestle in her chest. Her husband, Drew, came running from the garage, wrenching the garden hose from its holder, shouting, "Mara, what happened?" His voice trembled, and there was an urgency that made his chest tighten as if he could feel the gravity of the moment in his own bones. Mara pointed at the sandal, voice trembling. She's gone. She was just here. Drew, she vanished." They combed the immediate area, behind the barn, near the old shed, by the dry creek bed that ran through the back of the property, but there was nothing. No footprints leading away, no struggle, just silence, oppressive and heavy like a thick blanket of doom. The neighbors started coming out of their homes, drawn by the screaming, their faces pale, voices tight with worry and confusion. Mara's mother joined her, trembling, eyes wide, muttering something about evil spirits and curses, but Mara didn't hear her. She was already dialing 911, her hands shaking so violently she could barely press the buttons. The sheriff, a grizzled man named Tom Whitaker, arrived within 15 minutes with a small squad of deputies. Mara was still on her knees, her face buried in her hands, sobs racking her body. Tom's voice was calm, but there was an undercurrent of tension Mara could sense. He immediately organized search parties, sending deputies in every direction. Helicopters were called in from the nearby county town, their blades slicing the already tense air. Search dogs were brought in, and the scent of the panic-filled family mingled with the scent of the arid earth. Hours passed. The sun dipped below the horizon, bleeding reds and oranges into the sky, but Ellie was still missing. Each passing minute gnawed at Mara's mind. She felt as if time itself were mocking her, dragging her into a nightmare she could not wake from. She kept repeating Ellie's name, as if saying it aloud could summon her back. Night fell with a heavy, suffocating darkness, and the wind picked up, whistling through the old oak trees lining the property. Mara sat on the porch steps, clutching the sandal tightly, rocking back and forth. Drew tried to console her, but even his steady hands trembled, betraying his own fear. Then, almost imperceptibly at first, she saw movement at the edge of the yard, a shadow slinking between the corn stalks. Mara froze, heart hammering, eyes wide. At first she thought it was a deer, but as it approached, the form became impossible to mistake. A lioness, massive and golden, moved silently across the field. Her muscles rippled under her sleek fur, eyes sharp, almost human in their intelligence. The lioness stopped at the edge of the porch, tilting her head, examining Mara and Drew as if they were pieces in some puzzle only she could understand. Then she did something that made Mara's blood run cold. She tapped the glass of the window with her massive paw, soft, deliberate. The sound echoed through the house like a strange, foreign rhythm. The lioness's eyes locked onto Mara's, unblinking, almost pleading. What is she doing?" Drew whispered, his voice trembling. Mara didn't answer. She felt her body stiffen, every hair on her arm standing on end. It was as if the lioness had a message, some silent knowledge, something beyond human comprehension. Her mind raced. Could it be Ellie? Could the child be here? The rational part of her brain screamed, "It's a wild animal, she's dangerous. Run." Yet every instinct screamed otherwise. The lioness tapped the window again. This time, her gaze flicked toward the tree line in the distance, then back at Mara, before stepping back into the shadows and vanishing. Mara didn't move for a long, shivering moment. The adrenaline that had fueled her all evening was draining rapidly, leaving a numb, hollow terror. Her hands still clenched the sandal, her knuckles white. Drew placed a hand on her shoulder, but she flinched, still staring at the spot where the lioness had disappeared. The sheriff called from his truck, demanding updates. Mara could only manage to whisper, There was a lion. A lion came to the window." The deputies exchanged skeptical glances. "There are no wild lions in Arizona," one muttered. But Mara didn't care. She had seen the golden eyes, felt the weight of that gaze, and somehow knew that whatever this creature was, it was connected to Ellie's disappearance. Hours later, the town buzzed with rumors. Lights from flashlights and patrol cars danced over the fields. Helicopters circled, their searchlights cutting through the night like knives. But Ellie was nowhere to be found. Only the lioness in the corners of the yard, unseen but felt, haunted Mara's thoughts. That night Mara lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, haunted by the sound of a soft tap against the glass, though she knew she had boarded up the windows. Every creak of the house made her heart jump. Every shadow seemed alive. And every time she closed her eyes, she saw Ellie chasing fireflies, the sandal half buried in dust, and the golden gaze of the lioness watching from the shadows. The night stretched endlessly, a tense, suffocating nightmare. Somewhere outside, the lioness waited, as if insisting Mara understand something she could not yet comprehend. And somewhere beyond the woods, in the dark folds of the desert, the secret of Ellie's disappearance waited, silent, patient, and far more dangerous than Mara could imagine. The sun rose over Red Rock in the pale gold of early morning, but for Mara the light brought no comfort. She sat at the kitchen table, still clutching the blue sandal in her trembling hands. The events of the previous night felt like a fever dream. The screaming, the emptiness, the lioness at the window. She wanted to tell herself it was impossible, that no wild cat could have silently appeared, let alone convey some mysterious, almost human awareness. Yet she could not deny what she had seen. By mid-morning, Mara found herself compulsively glancing toward the window, as if expecting the impossible to repeat itself. And then, it did. The lioness was back. She stood at the edge of the yard, just beyond the flower beds, tall and luminous in the morning light. Her golden fur seemed almost iridescent in the sun, her muscles taut and perfectly poised. But it was her eyes that struck Mara, deep, unblinking, intelligent, almost pleading in their intensity. Mara's heart caught in her chest. The lioness tapped the window again, soft, purposeful, like a whisper Mara could feel through her bones. Drew, who had spent the night packing and muttering about wild animal nonsense, froze. "Mara, it can't." "Yes," she cut him off, voice low, tense. "It can." It wasn't just her imagination. The lioness had returned, and there was intent in her movement. She wasn't wandering aimlessly. She was communicating. Mara swallowed hard, eyes tearing. It's showing us something." For hours, Mara and Drew watched. The lioness paced along the yard's edge, stopping occasionally to glance at the house, then toward the tree line. At one point she crouched, sniffing at the ground, then lifted her paw and gently tapped the window once more before retreating a few steps. Then slowly, she turned and padded toward the back of the yard, stopping only to drop something in the dust. Mara's breath caught. She leaned forward, hands trembling, and picked up what had been left, the other blue sandal. Drew's eyes widened. That's impossible," he muttered. "She couldn't have." "She's telling us something," Mara said, voice cracking. "She knows where Ellie is." The sheriff, Tom Whitaker, arrived later that morning after a frantic phone call. His face was skeptical, the lines around his eyes deepening as Mara told him what had happened. "A lion?" he asked, tone flat. "In Arizona?" "Yes," Mara snapped, frustration edging her voice. She's intelligent, She's wild, Mara, dangerous. You can't reason with a lion," Drew said, trying to sound rational but failing. His jaw was tight, worry etched deep into his face. The sheriff's brow furrowed. "We'll put someone out there to see it, but Mara, we've got to focus on finding Ellie. Lions don't help in abductions." Mara couldn't shake the feeling that the sheriff's words were hollow, irrelevant. She had seen the lioness's intelligence firsthand. She had seen the tap, the almost human insistence, the guidance. This wasn't random. It wasn't coincidence. By afternoon, a small crowd of neighbors had gathered, drawn by the story of the child gone missing and the inexplicable visitor in the yard. Cameras, phones, and whispered speculation buzzed through the air. Some believed it was a hallucination brought on by fear and stress. Others whispered about miracles. Mara ignored them all, focusing solely on the lioness. At sunset, the lioness returned again. This time, she approached the window with an almost ritualistic precision, paw raised and tapping 3 times. Mara stepped closer, pressing her hand to the glass. The warmth of the window did nothing to dull the chill crawling up her spine. The lioness's gaze was unwavering, and in it, Mara could feel the echo of Ellie's presence. Suddenly, the lioness turned sharply, darting toward the tree line behind the house. Mara's breath caught. Her heart pounded. She followed instinctively, barefoot and trembling, Drew at her heels shouting, "Mara, wait! We don't know what's out there." The lioness stopped at the edge of the forest, glancing back at Mara as if to say, "Come." Then she vanished into the underbrush. Mara hesitated for only a heartbeat before plunging into the shadows of the trees. The forest was a labyrinth of sun-dappled dust, twisted mesquite trees, and undergrowth that scraped at her arms. Every step was filled with fear, the fear of what she might find and what she might lose. But the lioness moved ahead, unerringly, like a guide who had walked this path countless times before. Hours seemed to pass. The trail twisted deeper into the wilderness and the familiar landmarks of her childhood. The old creek, the abandoned corral, the faded mine shaft, blurred into something alien. Mara's lungs burned, sweat stung her eyes, and every snapping twig made her jump. But she could feel the lioness ahead, sure, deliberate, protecting her, warning her, guiding her. Then as twilight fell, Mara noticed it, small footprints in the dirt. Tiny, hurried, uneven. She froze. Her heart almost stopped. They were Ellie's. She dropped to her knees, tears streaming down her face, clutching the sandal in one hand and the air in front of her with the other. "Ellie," she whispered. "Ellie, where are you?" The lioness crouched low, ears flat, tail flicking with agitation. She growled softly, a warning, and nudged Mara forward. Mara didn't hesitate. Step by step, she followed the golden guide deeper into the forest, into a maze of shadows and whispers. Suddenly, a sound behind her made her spin, a twig snapping, crunching underfoot. Mara's heart lurched. She raised her flashlight and trained it on the darkness. A figure emerged, tall, ragged, and unshaven, wearing a tattered bomber jacket. His eyes were wild but careful, scanning the forest like he was both hunter and hunted. "Stop," he barked, voice rough. "Don't go any further." Mara froze, confusion and terror battling inside her. "Who are you?" she demanded. "Have you seen my daughter?" The man took a hesitant step forward, hands raised. I can't let you go. It's dangerous." His eyes flicked nervously toward the tree line. "That thing out here, it's not what you think." The lioness growled again, low, deep, resonant, a sound that shook Mara to her core. The man flinched, stepping back. "It's the only reason your daughter's still alive," he said finally, voice trembling. "She's protecting her, but you have to trust her. She's not just a lion." Mara's stomach tightened. She looked at the golden creature waiting silently a few feet away, muscles coiled, eyes intelligent and piercing. Her mind screamed this is insane, but her heart whispered the impossible truth. Somehow this lioness knew. Somehow she had seen Ellie. The man swallowed hard. "If you follow her, you have to do exactly what she does. One wrong step," he trailed off, shaking his head. "One wrong step and—" A distant rustle in the underbrush interrupted him, and the lioness stiffened, ears flat, tail lashing. Mara saw her chest rise and fall with measured, controlled breaths, the predator instincts fully alive. Something was out there, watching, waiting, threatening. Mara's hand tightened around the sandal in her pocket. She looked at Drew, who was pale, frozen, fear etched into every line of his face. Then she looked at the lioness, and she made her decision. "We follow her," Mara said, voice firm, trembling but resolute. "Whatever she wants to show us, she's the only chance we have to find Ellie." The lioness seemed to acknowledge her decision with a slow blink, then padded forward into the thickening dusk. Mara and Drew exchanged one last glance with the strange man in the bomber jacket before plunging into the forest, hearts pounding, minds racing, aware that every step forward could lead them closer to Ellie, or into a danger they could not yet imagine. And as the last light of day disappeared, the forest swallowed them whole. The lioness led them onward, and somewhere deep in the trees, the faintest sound of Ellie's voice echoed, so soft it could have been a trick of the wind, but it was enough to set Mara's soul on fire. Somewhere out there, her daughter was alive. But what waited beyond the tree line was something no one could have prepared for. The forest was alive with sound, but none of it was comforting. The wind whispered through the twisted mesquite and cottonwood trees, stirring dry leaves like whispered warnings. Mara's heart hammered in her chest as she followed the golden shape of the lioness through a maze of shadows and uneven ground. Every step she took, every branch that snapped underfoot, echoed in the quiet tension of the desert twilight. Drew stumbled behind her, gripping his flashlight like a lifeline. "Mara, are you sure about this?" he muttered, voice tight with fear. His eyes darted everywhere, catching shadows that weren't there, imagining shapes in the darkness that didn't exist, or maybe did. "We don't have a choice," Mara whispered, her hand brushing against the bark of a gnarled tree for balance. "The lioness, she's showing us the way. She knows where Ellie is." The man in the tattered bomber jacket followed a few paces behind, eyes scanning the shadows, fingers twitching near the small pistol at his hip. "You don't understand," he said urgently. "Every step forward is a risk. That thing out here, it's not natural, and it wants her." Mara swallowed, forcing herself to keep moving. "I don't care. Ellie's alive, and I'm going to find her." The lioness paused suddenly, ears pricked, eyes scanning a dense thicket. Mara froze, sensing that the animal had caught something Mara could not see. Its tail flicked sharply, and the low rumble of a growl vibrated through the forest, a warning Mara felt in her bones. The bomber jacket man's face went pale. "Stay behind her," he whispered. "Whatever's out here, it can smell fear. It feeds on it." Mara nodded, heart pounding so hard it felt like it would burst through her chest. She took a careful step forward, following the lioness, who moved with a predator's grace, avoiding dry branches and loose stones as if she were mapping the terrain in her mind. The golden light of the setting sun filtered through the trees, casting long, skeletal shadows across the path, making the forest feel endless, menacing, alive. Hours passed, though Mara could not be sure. Time seemed to stretch in the dense woodland, each step heavier than the last. She noticed strange markers along the trail, broken branches, claw marks on the trees, patches of upturned dirt. The lioness paused at each one, sniffing, examining, then nudging Mara forward. At one point, they reached a dry creek bed lined with jagged rocks. The lioness leapt across with a grace that made Mara's stomach lurch. She followed carefully, testing each stone with her weight hard in her throat. Drew almost slipped, letting out a strangled curse as his foot skidded on loose gravel. The man grabbed him by the arm, steadying him. "We don't have room for mistakes," he muttered. "One wrong step and we don't just lose time, we could lose everything." Mara glanced at him sharply. "What do you mean, everything?" He hesitated, his jaw tight, eyes darting to the shadows. "I mean, the forest isn't just a forest. Not anymore. There's something else out here. Something Ellie stumbled onto, something I've been trying to contain for weeks." Mara's pulse quickened. "Contain, what do you mean?" Before he could answer, the lioness froze, ears flat against her skull, tail lashing. She crouched low, a growl vibrating deep in her throat. Mara's stomach sank. Something moved in the shadows, a form too large to be human, too quick to be any ordinary animal. Something with teeth that gleamed even in the fading light, something that made the trees shiver. Mara swallowed hard. "Ellie," she whispered almost to herself. The creature emerged into the fading light. A twisted, mangled mountain lion, its fur matted with dirt and blood, limbs warped and uneven, eyes reflecting the last sliver of daylight like shards of ice. Its low, guttural hiss echoed through the trees, chilling Mara to the bone. The lioness roared, stepping between Mara and the creature. Her roar shook the leaves and made the shadows leap. She lunged, claws extended, and the two animals collided with a sound that made Mara flinch. The twisted mountain lion hissed and struck with desperate ferocity, but the golden lioness moved with precision, defending her charge. Mara's knees threatened to buckle. I can't believe this," she muttered, shaking. Drew grabbed her arm. Don't look away, don't panic, just follow her." They continued through the forest, the mangled mountain lion circling at a distance but never abandoning its threat. Mara's heart beat so fast it felt like a drum in her chest. Every step felt like walking a knife's edge. One misstep, one glance in the wrong direction, and it could all end. The forest opened briefly into a small clearing. The ground was littered with old, rusted mining equipment, remnants of abandoned gold prospecting from decades ago. Shadows pooled beneath twisted metal, and the silence was almost unbearable. Mara could hear the distant hiss of the mountain lion, the low growls of the lioness, and Ellie's faint voice, soft, almost pleading. "Mommy!" Mara froze, tears stinging her eyes. She ran forward, calling, "Ellie, where are you?" The lioness darted ahead, pausing only to glance back at Mara, urging her forward. The bomber jacket man followed cautiously, muttering warnings under his breath about unstable tunnels and hidden shafts. Mara pressed on, heart pounding, following the golden guide deeper into the forest, through the maze of shadows and the remnants of old mining operations. The forest grew denser, more tangled, the canopy above thickening until sunlight barely filtered through. Every step brought a new danger: hidden holes, slick rocks, broken branches ready to trip an unsuspecting foot. But the lioness moved with confidence, guiding them carefully, almost protectively. Finally, they reached the edge of a ravine, jagged rocks and loose soil crumbling down to a narrow, dark opening that led underground. Mara's breath caught. The air smelled metallic, damp, and cold, unlike anything she'd breathed before in the desert heat. The lioness approached the opening, sniffing the air, tail flicking. She looked at Mara once more, eyes intense, almost pleading. Then she padded toward the entrance and disappeared into the darkness. Mara's stomach twisted with fear and hope. "Ellie," she whispered, tears streaming down her face. "I'm coming." The bomber jacket man stepped closer. "Stop," he said urgently. "You don't understand what's down there, you can't just—" "I don't care," Mara snapped. "Ellie is down there, and if that lioness is leading me, then I have to follow, I have to." Drew grabbed her hand, squeezing it tightly. "We'll be careful, but we stay together, we don't split up." The man nodded reluctantly, following close behind. Fine, but one wrong step. His voice trailed off, eyes scanning the shadows of the cavern like he expected it to leap out and grab them. The darkness swallowed them as they crawled into the mine shaft. The walls were cold and jagged claw marks etched deep into the rock. Every sound, footsteps, breathing, the occasional scuff of rock underfoot, echoed like thunder. Mara's mind raced. Where was Ellie? And what had the man meant by something out here? The faintest sound reached them, Ellie's voice, weak but unmistakable. "Mommy, help!" Mara broke into a run, crawling and stumbling through the dirt and rock, following the soft, glowing presence of the lioness ahead. Every instinct screamed danger, yet she pushed forward, desperate, driven by love and fear. The walls of the tunnel seemed to close in and the shadows grew deeper, almost sentient. Mara felt a chill crawl up her spine. Something in the darkness was watching, waiting, and it was patient. Somewhere deeper in the earth, her daughter was alive. And somewhere else something waited, something hungry, something twisted, that Mara could not yet see. But the lioness would not let them fail. And Mara knew, with an icy certainty, that she would follow this golden guide wherever it led, even if it led into the very jaws of danger itself. The cavern opened into a dimly lit chamber, the faint glow of Mara's flashlight bouncing off jagged walls and reflecting in the eyes of the lioness ahead. The air was damp, metallic, and carried a faint, almost chemical odor that made Mara's stomach churn. Each step she took on the loose dirt echoed like a drumbeat, swallowed and magnified by the hollow space around them. The lioness paused, nose twitching, ears flat. She crouched low and let out a guttural growl, a warning that vibrated through the walls of the cavern and through Mara's chest. Mara froze, gripping the flashlight so tightly her knuckles went white. From the shadows of the chamber, a tall figure emerged. He moved cautiously, shoulders tense, eyes wide with fear. His bomber jacket was torn at the left sleeve, revealing long, deep claw marks that looked fresh. In his hand he carried a tranquilizer gun, and the metallic click as he cocked it echoed ominously through the chamber. "Stay back," he barked, voice hoarse and urgent. "You don't understand what's in here." Mara took a cautious step forward, the blue sandal clutched tightly in one hand. "Who are you? Where's my daughter?" The man's eyes darted nervously to the shadows behind the lioness. I've been tracking something dangerous, and your daughter, she saw it first." His voice trembled and he swallowed hard, fear etched deep into his lined face. "The lioness, she chased it away, but it's still here, and it's smart, smarter than you can imagine." Mara's pulse raced. "Chased what away? Where is she? Where's Ellie?" The man hesitated, eyes flicking to the ground. "The mine, it's been used for experiments. Illegal, dangerous. I've been trying to contain it, but your daughter, she wandered too close." Mara's breath caught. "Experiments? What are you talking about?" He shook his head, voice dropping to a whisper. "I can't explain everything right now. You need to trust me. The lioness, she's not just protecting her. She's guiding you. She knows where Ellie is." A soft sound echoed from the depths of the chamber, a faint, trembling cry. Mara's heart leapt. "Ellie," she called, voice shaking. "SHH," the man hissed. "Not so loud." His eyes scanned the dark tunnel ahead. "If it hears you, it will come. It won't hesitate. I've been trying to keep it contained for weeks. It's not natural. It's clever, fast, and extremely dangerous." The lioness growled again, low and threatening, moving closer to Mara. Her eyes were fixed on the shadows ahead, muscles coiled, ready to strike. Mara could feel the weight of her presence, a living, breathing shield, fierce and unrelenting. What does it look like?" Mara asked, voice tight with fear. The man swallowed hard. "It's deformed, twisted by starvation, pain, and experiments. Limbs uneven, eyes like shards of ice, fur matted and torn. It hunts children because it can sense innocence, vulnerability. Your daughter was lucky the lioness found her first." Mara's hands shook violently. Lucky she's 5, she's just a child. I know, the man said, voice breaking. I know, that's why the lioness is here. She chose to intervene. If she hadn't, he trailed off, shaking his head in despair. Mara felt a wave of gratitude toward the lioness, her golden guide who had somehow bridged the gap between instinct and intelligence, warning them, guiding them through the dangerous labyrinth of the desert forest and now this underground chamber. She knelt, brushing a hand against the lioness's fur. "Thank you," she whispered. The man's voice cut sharply through the moment. "We don't have time to waste. It could strike at any second." He motioned toward a narrow tunnel branching off the chamber. "That's where she went. Ellie is somewhere down there. You follow the lioness exactly as she moves. One mistake, one wrong step," and his voice faltered. "We don't survive this." Myra took a deep breath, heart hammering. "I'll follow her. I don't care what it is. Ellie's alive and I'm going to find her." Drew gripped her arm. "We do this together, no splitting up, no mistakes." The man nodded grimly. "Stay close and keep quiet. Whatever you do, don't make noise. It hunts by sound and it's fast, faster than anything you've ever seen." The lioness moved first, leaping over a jagged rock and entering the tunnel with a grace that defied the cramped space. Mara followed, crawling and stepping over debris, Drew close behind her, and the man bringing up the rear, tense and scanning the shadows. The air grew colder as they descended, damp and fetid, carrying the faint smell of earth and metal. The walls were etched with claw marks, deep, desperate gouges that spoke of a struggle too terrible to imagine. Mara's stomach churned. She pressed the blue sandal to her chest, focusing on the thought of Ellie, on the child's warmth, her voice, her small hands. They moved cautiously, following the lioness's lead. Every so often she would pause, glance back, and make a low, vibrating sound, almost a warning. Mara learned to stop, to listen, to breathe silently in rhythm with the animal. Every instinct screamed at her to run, to flee, but she knew the lioness was not just a guide. She was their protector. A faint, shivering voice reached them through the darkness. Mommy." Mara's heart seized. "Ellie," she cried, tears blinding her. She ran, hands clawing at the rocky floor, guided only by the faint voice and the glowing presence of the lioness ahead. The bomber jacket man's hand shot out, grabbing her shoulder. "Wait, move slowly, if it hears you." But Mara ignored him, urgency overriding fear. The lioness turned her head, letting out a soft hiss that seemed to calm the tension, as if signaling that Mara's instinct to run toward her child was justified. They reached a small chamber, the tunnel opening into a rough-hewn space barely wide enough for a person to stand. And there she was, Ellie. The child was huddled against a wall, dirt-smudged and trembling, eyes wide with terror. Mara dropped to her knees, gathering her daughter into her arms. "Ellie, it's okay. Mommy's here." Ellie sobbed into Mara's chest. It tried to take me." Mara hugged her tightly, tears streaming. "I know, baby, I know. You're safe now. The lioness saved you." The golden lioness crouched nearby, growling softly, eyes scanning the shadows. She was tense, alert, every muscle coiled and ready. Mara realized that even now, the danger had not passed. The underground chamber seemed to pulse with unseen life. The man's voice trembled. "We need to get out. It won't stop hunting. Not unless we leave, follow her lead, and keep Ellie close. Don't make a sound." Drew took Ellie's hand, her small fingers gripping his tightly. "We're getting out, kiddo," he whispered. "We're getting out together." The lioness led them back through the chamber, every step precise, cautious. Mara noticed new claw marks in the walls, deeper than before, fresh and desperate, proof that the creature was still somewhere nearby. Her pulse raced, adrenaline spiking as the tension thickened like fog. At one point, the man whispered urgently, "This next section is unstable. One wrong step and it collapses. You don't want to see what happens if the ceiling falls." Mara swallowed, pressing herself against Ellie, following the lioness. Each step was deliberate. The shadows seemed to twist around them, alive, watching. Every noise, every whisper of wind made Mara flinch. Then the low, guttural roar of the creature echoed from deep within the tunnel, a sound that made Mara's blood run cold. The lioness hissed, stepping between Mara and Ellie, fur bristling, muscles taut. Mara realized in that instant that this was no ordinary animal. Whatever was in these tunnels, it had adapted, learned, and it was hunting. And yet the lioness was unafraid. Her golden eyes met Mara's for a brief, intense moment, as if to say, "Trust me, I will not fail." Mara nodded, heart hammering, tears and sweat streaming down her face. "I trust you," she whispered. Ahead, the shadows of the tunnel deepened. Somewhere beyond them lay safety or death. Mara didn't know which, but she followed the lioness, gripping Ellie tightly, every nerve alive with fear, hope, and the raw, unyielding will of a mother determined to save her child. And somewhere in the darkness, unseen, the creature waited. The air grew colder as Mara, Drew, and the man in the bomber jacket crawled deeper into the earth, following the lioness's sure-footed lead. The tunnel walls pressed in close, slick with damp, and every sound, the scuff of shoes, the faint drip of water, the low vibration of the lioness's growl, echoed off the jagged rock. Mara could feel the heartbeat of the earth, pulsing through her bones, syncing with her own. Ellie's soft whimpers were ahead, muffled yet insistent, calling Mara forward. Her daughter was alive but terrified, and every step toward her was both a relief and a torment. Mara pressed the blue sandal to her chest, an anchor to sanity in a place that seemed designed to crush it. The bomber jacket man whispered urgently, "This section is unstable. One misstep and the walls could cave in." He crouched low, scanning the shadows. "We don't have time. Move slowly. Follow her lead." The lioness, golden fur dim in the flickering light of Mara's flashlight, paused at a fork in the tunnel. She sniffed the air, muscles tense, tail flicking like a pendulum of warning. Then with precise, deliberate steps she chose the right path, heading toward a faint, distant sound. The unmistakable voice of Ellie, small and trembling, calling for her mother. Mara's heart clenched. "Ellie," she whispered, crawling faster, ignoring the ache in her knees and the scrape of jagged rock against her hands. Drew followed, carrying Ellie's second sandal from earlier, holding it like a talisman against the darkness. The tunnel suddenly widened into a jagged chamber, barely large enough to stand upright. The walls were carved with claw marks, fresh, desperate, and deep gouges cut through the rock, evidence of something both intelligent and feral. The metallic scent in the air intensified, sharp and acrid, making Mara gag. She pressed her hand to Ellie's back, feeling the child's trembling frame beneath her fingers. And then she saw her. Ellie was huddled in the corner of the chamber, dirt-smeared, shaking uncontrollably. Her eyes were wide, wet with tears, reflecting the faint light of Mara's flashlight. "Mommy!" she cried, voice small, brittle. Mara dropped to her knees, scooping her child into her arms. "It's okay, baby, I'm here. I've got you," Mara whispered, tears blinding her. Ellie buried her face in Mara's shoulder, shivering from cold and terror. But the relief was short-lived. From the far shadows of the chamber came a low, guttural hiss, a sound that made Mara's blood run cold. The mangled mountain lion, twisted and uneven, stepped into the dim light. Its eyes reflected the flashlight like shards of ice. Limbs warped, claws jagged, teeth gnashing. It advanced slowly, deliberately, like a predator that understood the terrain perfectly. The lioness positioned herself between Mara, Drew, and Ellie, muscles coiled, tail lashing. She let out a deep, resonant roar that shook the chamber and echoed down the tunnels. The twisted creature froze for a moment, calculating, then lunged with terrifying speed. The sound of claws scraping rock, growls, and roars filled the chamber. The two animals collided, a violent, feral clash. The golden lioness moved with precision, countering every strike, blocking, lunging, her instincts perfect, fluid. Mara clutched Ellie tighter, tears streaming down her face, heart hammering like a drum. The bomber jacket man muttered under his breath, It's faster than anything I've ever tracked. Be careful, if it breaks through, he trailed off, eyes wide with panic. The twisted mountain lion hissed again, striking at the lioness, and the tunnel shook with the impact. Dust and small rocks rained from the ceiling, making the chamber feel even more claustrophobic, threatening to bury them all alive. Mara felt her stomach twist. Every instinct screamed danger, but the lioness did not falter. She snarled, counterattacked, and forced the creature back into the shadows, buying Mara precious seconds to think, to breathe, to prepare to flee. "Mommy, it's coming," Ellie screamed, her small arms clutching Mara's neck. "Stay down, baby," Mara shouted, pressing her daughter against her chest. "Stay with me." The man in the bomber jacket grabbed Drew's arm. "There's a secondary exit. If you can get Ellie out, get her to safety, I'll try to hold it off." Mara shook her head fiercely. "No, we leave together, all of us." The lioness seemed to understand Mara's resolve. She let out a low growl, then darted forward, forcing the twisted mountain lion back. The creature hissed in fury, but the golden predator did not waver. Mara realized then that this lioness was no ordinary animal. She wasn't just protective. She was intelligent, calculating, and willing to fight to the death for the humans she had somehow chosen to protect. Mara took a deep breath. "We follow her lead," she whispered to Drew and Ellie. "We move slowly, carefully, and we stay together." The chamber seemed to stretch infinitely, shadows curling like living things. The low growls and clashes of claws echoed endlessly, a constant reminder of the predator lurking in the dark. The lioness paused at the edge of a narrow shaft, sniffing the air, muscles tense. She glanced back at Mara and Ellie, then disappeared down the shaft with a grace that seemed impossible. Mara swallowed hard, gripping Ellie. "Here we go," she whispered. She and Drew followed, the man bringing up the rear, scanning every shadow, weapon ready. The narrow shaft descended steeply and the walls were slick with moisture. Mara's palms scraped against the rock, each step a battle between fear and determination. Ellie clung to her, tiny fingers digging into her shoulder. Mara whispered constant reassurance, "I'm right here, baby. I've got you." At the bottom, they entered a secondary chamber. It was smaller, but the ceiling was lower and the air felt heavier. The metallic scent was stronger, almost suffocating. Then a faint sound, scratching, low growls, something moving just out of sight. The man in the bomber jacket's voice was barely a whisper. "It's circling, stay close. Don't make a sound, let the lioness lead." Suddenly, the twisted mountain lion leapt from the shadows, claws extended, jaws snapping. The lioness met it head-on, their bodies colliding in a violent tangle of fur and teeth. The force of the impact shook the chamber. Rocks fell from the ceiling. Mara stumbled, almost losing Ellie, but Drew caught her just in time. "Keep moving," Mara shouted over the roar and the crash of rocks. "Follow her." The lioness darted toward a faint opening in the back of the chamber, muscles rippling, eyes glowing with determination. Mara and Drew scrambled after her, Ellie pressed tightly against Mara's chest. The man in the bomber jacket struggled to fend off the twisted mountain lion, firing the tranquilizer gun with desperate precision. Finally, they reached the back tunnel. The air here was slightly warmer, less suffocating, the walls sloping upward. Light, a dim, eerie glow from the outside began to seep in. Mara's pulse raced with hope. "We're almost there," she whispered to Ellie, brushing the child's hair from her tear-streaked face. "Almost there, baby." But the growls behind them reminded Mara that danger was never far. The lioness continued to lead, darting between shadows and light, guiding them with a precise, almost human intelligence. Mara realized that without her, they would never have made it this far. And somewhere deeper in the darkness, the twisted mountain lion lurked, waiting for its next chance. Mara pressed Ellie closer. "Hold on, baby. We're going to make it, I promise." The tunnel sloped upward sharply, and just beyond the bend, a faint glow of daylight promised safety. But Mara knew the real test was still ahead. The lioness paused, ears pricked, tail flicking. She turned her golden eyes toward Mara and Ellie, almost as if asking, "Are you ready?" Mara nodded, chest tight with exhaustion and terror. "I'm ready," she whispered. With that, the golden guide led them into the final stretch of the underground passage, toward the light, toward freedom, and toward a confrontation that would change their lives forever. The tunnel opened abruptly into a cavern unlike anything Mara had ever seen. Jagged walls rose high, glistening with moisture, reflecting the dim light of her flashlight in 1,000 fractured shards. Stalactites hung like deadly teeth from the ceiling, dripping steadily into small, stagnant pools below. The air was colder here, heavy with a metallic tang, and every sound, the scuff of boots, the drip of water, the low rumble of the Lioness, echoed like a warning. Ellie clung tightly to Mara's chest, her small arms wrapped around her mother's neck, her tears soaking into Mara's shirt. "Mommy, it's here," she whispered, voice trembling. Mara swallowed hard, pressing a hand to Ellie's back. "I know, baby, I know, but we're together, we're safe. The Lioness is with us." The golden Lioness stepped ahead, her movements precise, her muscles taut, tail flicking as she scanned the shadows. She stopped at the edge of the cavern, ears flat, and let out a low growl that vibrated through the stone floor. Mara's stomach tightened. She could feel the presence of something massive lurking in the darkness ahead, something that did not belong. The bomber jacket man whispered urgently, "This is it, the lair. Whatever took your daughter, it's here, and it's waiting." Mara's heart pounded. "Ellie, we're going to get you out of here." She tightened her hold on the child, forcing herself to breathe steadily despite the fear that threatened to consume her. From the shadows emerged a creature so grotesque, so twisted, that Mara felt her stomach drop. The mangled mountain lion had grown even more feral in the cavern's gloom. Its limbs were warped, fur matted and streaked with blood, eyes glowing like shards of ice. Its movements were deliberate, predatory, intelligent. It hissed, low and menacing, as it stepped into the open. The Lioness growled in response, stepping forward to block the path, muscles coiled like springs ready to snap. She hissed and bared her teeth, a deep, resonant sound that echoed off the cavern walls. Mara pressed Ellie closer, whispering, "Stay calm, baby. Don't let it see fear. It can't hurt us if we follow her lead." The man in the bomber jacket muttered, "It's smarter than anything I've tracked. It's been feeding on fear for weeks, hunting, learning. If it senses panic, it strikes. Be careful." Suddenly, the creature lunged, claws extended, jaws snapping. The Lioness met it head-on, a violent collision that shook the cavern. Rocks tumbled from the ceiling, dust filled the air, and the low, guttural growls of the twisted mountain lion mixed with the protective roars of the golden Lioness, creating a cacophony that made Mara's blood run cold. Drew took Ellie's hand, holding her tightly. "We move with her. Stay close, Ellie." The Lioness fought with terrifying precision, striking and countering with a deadly grace. The twisted mountain lion retaliated with savage ferocity, but every time it struck, the Lioness anticipated it, deflecting, countering, and forcing it back. Mara realized in that moment just how extraordinary this creature was, not just strong, but intelligent, strategic, and fiercely protective. The man in the bomber jacket muttered, voice tense, "This is it. She's giving everything she's got to protect them." Mara's eyes filled with tears. "Thank you," she whispered to the Lioness. "Thank you for saving my daughter." The twisted mountain lion hissed again, circling them, testing, waiting for an opening. Mara's stomach twisted. Every instinct screamed danger, every hair on her arm stood on end. Yet she pressed forward, following the Lioness, letting her child cling to her, moving as silently and carefully as she could. At the far end of the cavern, a narrow crevice opened into a secondary tunnel. The Lioness darted ahead, pausing only to glance back at Mara and Ellie, almost as if asking, "Are you ready?" Mara nodded, voice tight with resolve. "I'm ready," she whispered. The twisted mountain lion hissed again, circling closer. Its eyes gleamed with a cruel intelligence, reflecting the dim light as if calculating the exact moment to strike. Mara's heart hammered. She could feel Ellie trembling in her arms. "Hold on, baby," she whispered. "We're almost there." The lioness bolted through the crevice, muscles rippling with lethal grace. Mara followed, careful not to make a sound. Drew brought up the rear, scanning the shadows with wide, fearful eyes. The man in the bomber jacket stayed behind, distracting the creature, firing the tranquilizer gun with precise, desperate aim. The hiss and growl of the mountain lion echoed through the tunnels like thunder. The crevice opened into a small chamber, jagged walls enclosing them like a cage. Light seeped in faintly from a fissure above, casting long, eerie shadows across the rocky floor. The lioness crouched at the far edge, eyes glowing, tail flicking, ready to strike at any moment. Mara's breath came in ragged gasps. "Ellie, it's just a little farther, we can do this." She pressed her daughter to her chest, feeling the rapid heartbeat, the small, trembling body. "You're safe. I've got you." Suddenly, a low rumble shook the chamber. Rocks fell from the ceiling. Dust filled the air. The twisted mountain lion lunged from the shadows, teeth bared, claws extended. The lioness met it head-on, a blur of gold and feral energy. The collision sent a spray of dust and rock into the air. Mara stumbled, nearly losing her grip on Ellie, but Drew caught her just in time. "Stay down," Mara shouted, pressing Ellie against her chest. "Stay with me." The battle between the two predators was violent, ferocious, and almost hypnotic in its intensity. The lioness moved with surgical precision, striking where it mattered, countering the attacks, defending the humans with unrelenting ferocity. Mara realized that without her guide, without the golden lioness, they would have no chance. The bomber jacket man shouted from behind, "Move! Move now, the exit is just ahead." Mara's heart leapt. She glanced toward the faint light seeping through the fissure above. The exit was close, but the twisted mountain lion was relentless, circling, striking, testing, waiting for an opening. The lioness let out a deafening roar, a sound filled with rage, intelligence, and pure protective instinct. The twisted creature hesitated, just long enough for Mara to take a careful step forward. Ellie clutched tightly in her arms. Drew followed, moving swiftly but cautiously. Step by step, they made their way toward the fissure. The lioness covered every inch of ground ahead, blocking and countering, her body a living shield. Mara's chest ached with exhaustion, fear, and gratitude. Every fiber of her being screamed with tension, but she pressed on, following the golden guide, trusting her entirely. Finally, they reached the fissure. Light poured in, faint but brilliant, cutting through the darkness like a promise. Mara could hear the creature's frustrated growls fading as the lioness forced it back into the shadows. She climbed toward the opening, Ellie clinging desperately, heart pounding with relief and terror. The lioness followed, muscles coiled, moving through the opening with unerring precision. Mara and Drew scrambled after her, the bomber jacket man covering the rear, firing a final shot into the darkness. They emerged into the faint light outside, the cool evening air hitting their faces. Ellie gasped, taking in the open sky, and clung to Mara. "Mommy, we're out." "Yes, baby," Mara whispered, tears streaming down her face. "We're out, we're safe now." The lioness stood at the edge of the forest, golden eyes glowing in the twilight. She gave one long, low growl, scanning the shadows one last time, then disappeared into the trees. Mara held Ellie close, chest heaving, staring into the forest. She knew with a deep, unshakable certainty that the lioness had saved them. She had guided them, protected them, and chosen them. The bomber jacket man approached, exhausted but alive. "You're lucky," he said, voice hoarse. "Most people, they don't make it, not from down there, not with that thing hunting them." Mara nodded, still holding Ellie, tears flowing freely. "We know, and we'll never forget, she saved our lives." And somewhere deep in the forest, the lioness had vanished. But Mara knew she would always be watching, always protecting, always a silent guardian of the child she had chosen to save. The family, exhausted and shaken, made their way back toward the faint lights of Red Rock, the shadows of the underground lair lingering in their minds, the echoes of claws and growls haunting them. But one truth remained: Ellie was alive. They were alive. And the golden lioness had led them through the impossible. The first breaths of fresh air hit Mara's face like a wave, and for a moment the horror of the underground tunnels seemed to lift. Ellie clung to her, small and trembling but alive. Drew followed closely, protective, scanning the forest around them for any lingering threat. Mara could still feel the heat of terror coiling in her stomach, the echoes of claws and growls vibrating in her bones. But safety, as Mara quickly learned, is rarely permanent. A sudden rumble shook the ground beneath them. Loose rocks tumbled from the cliffside and the golden light of dusk caught on shifting dust. Mara froze. Her heart slammed against her ribs. What's happening?" she whispered. The man in the bomber jacket, pale and shaking, glanced back toward the mine entrance. "It's unstable," he said, voice tight with fear. "The tunnels, they've been weakened for months. The fight, the creature, it's destabilized everything. If we don't move now, we won't get out." The lioness, who had paused at the edge of the forest, growled, low and urgent, tail lashing. Mara realized the animal sensed the danger even before they did. Every muscle in her body coiled, mirroring the tension of the golden guide. "Come on," Mara shouted, gripping Ellie tightly. "We move now." They sprinted down the faint trail leading from the forest back toward the outskirts of Red Rock. Dust and small pebbles slid beneath their feet as the ground trembled beneath them. Behind them, the first crash of collapsing rock echoed from the mine, sharp and terrifying, followed by another and another. The golden lioness darted ahead, pausing only to glance back, eyes locked with Mara's. "Follow me," they seemed to say. Mara's chest tightened. She had never felt such raw, unflinching trust in another being. Not human, not friend, not stranger. This was pure instinct guiding them home. The rumbling grew louder. Trees shook violently, loose branches snapping and falling around them. The bomber jacket man shouted over the chaos, "Keep moving. Don't stop." His voice was tense with terror but controlled, driven by the knowledge that every second counted. Mara stumbled, Ellie's small hands gripping her shoulder, fear radiating from the child. "I can't, my legs," she gasped. Drew grabbed her arm, hauling her forward. "No time to stop. We run or we die." A massive crash resounded from behind. Dust and debris flew into the air, and Mara caught a glimpse of the mouth of the mine collapsing, boulders tumbling into the abyss like hungry jaws. The twisted mountain lion, if it had survived the fight, would have been trapped inside. Mara allowed herself a flicker of relief, but immediately suppressed it. The danger wasn't over. The forest around them shook violently, trees swaying, dirt and pebbles raining down. Mara's pulse raced, adrenaline spiking as they ran, the golden lioness leading the way, moving with a speed and precision that made every human step seem slow and clumsy. They reached a narrow creek that cut across the path. The water was shallow, but the rocks were slick. Mara slipped, nearly falling, but Drew grabbed her in time. Ellie's terrified cry spurred them forward, and they scrambled across the rocks, limbs slick with mud and water. Behind them, another thunderous crash shook the forest. Dust and debris flew into the air, blocking the fading light. Mara glanced back. The mine mouth had collapsed entirely, a mountain of rock and soil sealing the cavern below. The man in the bomber jacket exhaled shakily. "It's over for now." But the lioness didn't stop. She paused only briefly, scanning the perimeter, muscles taut, eyes alert. Mara realized then that the animal wasn't just protecting them from the underground creature. It was guarding against all threats, natural or unnatural. The forest itself seemed to hum with tension, every rustle and shadow magnified. They continued through the thickening dusk, branches scraping their skin, thorns tearing at clothing, every step a battle against nature and exhaustion. Mara could feel Ellie's small frame trembling against her, hear her quiet sobs, and press kisses into the child's hair to offer comfort she barely felt herself. Suddenly, a shadow darted across their path. Mara froze. Drew stepped protectively in front of Ellie. The man in the bomber jacket's eyes widened, and for a moment, silence fell over the forest like a held breath. Then the golden lioness stepped forward, tall, commanding, every muscle poised. The shadow retreated. Mara realized with awe that the lioness wasn't just leading them, it was patrolling, ensuring nothing followed them from the collapsing tunnels or from the depths of the forest. They pressed on, emerging from the thickest part of the woods into a small clearing, where the fatting light of red rock flickered against distant buildings. Mara's knees weakened with relief and exhaustion. Ellie clung tighter, sobbing with relief. "Mommy, we're safe." Mara hugged her, tears streaming down her face. "Yes, baby, we're safe. We made it." The man in the bomber jacket finally exhaled fully, leaning against a tree. "Most people don't survive that place. You're lucky, extremely lucky." Drew knelt to brush dirt from Ellie's clothes, murmuring, "You're safe now, kiddo, I promise." Mara turned her gaze to the edge of the clearing. The golden lioness crouched atop a small rise, scanning the forest one last time before vanishing silently among the trees. Mara's throat tightened. She had seen something impossible: intelligence, bravery, and a connection to life that felt almost human. You saved us," Mara whispered into the empty air, knowing the lioness could never hear her, yet unable to resist acknowledging it. Ellie tugged at her mother's sleeve, voice small. "Mommy, she's gone." "Yes, baby," Mara said, holding her close. "She had to go, but she made sure we were safe." The man in the bomber jacket gave Mara a serious look. "You should know, she's not like any lion you've ever seen. That's why she could do this. And she might come back if she senses danger again." Mara nodded slowly, absorbing the weight of what had just occurred. "I understand. I'll never forget her." Even as they made their way back toward the small lights of red rock, the memory of the cavern, the twisted mountain lion, and the golden guardian that had saved them would remain burned into their minds. Mara knew the town would never believe their story, but she didn't care. They were alive. Ellie was alive. And somewhere in the forest, a lioness roamed, vigilant and unyielding, watching over the family she had chosen to protect. Mara exhaled, pressing Ellie close, the child's soft sobs fading into quiet breathing. Drew placed a hand on her shoulder, eyes still wide with shock. "We're okay," he said softly. "We made it." "Yes," Mara whispered, voice trembling. "We made it thanks to her." The family stood together in the clearing, the forest around them settling into an eerie calm. The golden lioness was gone, leaving behind only the memory of courage, intelligence, and something almost human. But the shadows of the tunnels, the horrors below, and the whispers of the forest lingered in Mara's mind. She knew the story wasn't over, not entirely. Something about the lioness, the mine, and the dark presence underground hinted at mysteries far deeper than red rock could hold. And in the back of her mind, she felt a quiet, pulsing certainty. They would never be truly alone. The sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in fiery shades of orange and red. Mara held Ellie tightly, Drew at her side, and together they walked toward the lights of red rock, alive, shaken, and forever changed by the guardian who had appeared at their window, guiding them through impossible danger. But deep in the forest, a pair of golden eyes watched silently, unwavering, waiting, patient, and unforgettably alive. The first real sunlight of morning spilled across red rock, golden and warm, a stark contrast to the cold, suffocating darkness of the mine tunnels in the shadowed forest. Mara, Ellie pressed tightly against her chest, walked slowly down the cracked sidewalk, Drew flanking her. The town was waking up, oblivious to the horrors that had unfolded mere miles away. A faint hum of distant traffic, a bird's tentative chirp, the clink of shop shutters opening. mundane sounds that felt impossibly loud after the silence and terror they had endured underground. Ellie's small hands clung to Mara's neck as she whispered, voice barely audible, "Mommy, was it real?" Mara's throat tightened. "Yes, baby, it was real, but we're safe now, we made it." Her eyes scanned the streets ahead, half expecting shadows to move, claws to scrape, or eyes to gleam in the distance. The fear of the forest, the mine, the creature, lingered like a cold hand on her shoulder, but she refused to give it power. Drew glanced back at the tree line, his face pale but relieved. "She's gone," he said softly, voice tinged with awe. "The lioness, she's gone, but she saved all of us." Mara nodded, tears prickling her eyes. She knew exactly what she was doing. She guided us, protected us, she chose us. The bomber jacket man approached cautiously, exhaustion etched into every line of his face. "Most people don't survive what happened last night. That thing, whatever it was, would have killed them all. If not for the lioness." He shook his head, voice trailing off, fear still clinging to it like a second skin. "We owe her everything," Mara said. "I don't even know how to thank her." He looked at her gravely. "You don't. Some guardians don't need thanks, they just act." Mara's gaze drifted toward the distant tree line. Somewhere deep in the forest, the golden lioness roamed. Mara could almost feel the intelligence in those eyes, the silent promise that she would watch over them always. She swallowed hard, realizing that this creature had saved her daughter not once, but twice, from the shadows of the forest and the darkness beneath the earth. Ellie tugged at her mother's sleeve. "Mommy, will she come back?" Mara knelt, brushing her child's tangled hair from her tear-streaked face. "Maybe, baby. If we ever need her again, I think she will." Ellie nodded, eyes wide, a mix of wonder and fear reflecting in her gaze. As they moved closer to the town center, the signs of life returned fully. Neighbors emerging from houses, morning deliveries, the casual hum of daily existence. Mara's heart ached at the thought of returning to normal life after the extraordinary terror they had survived. She knew Red Rock would never understand the lioness, the underground danger, the courage of a golden guardian who had appeared at their window, tapping softly, guiding them through impossible peril. They passed the little park where children played, oblivious to what had happened only hours before. Mara tightened her grip on Ellie, feeling the warmth of the child's small body, the rapid beat of her heart calming against her own. Drew spoke softly, almost to himself. "You know, when I first saw that lioness at the window, I thought we were doomed. But then she led us, every step. She knew exactly what to do." Mara nodded, staring into the distance. "Some things in this world we can't explain. We can only trust them, and we did. And because of that, Ellie's alive." The bomber jacket man's gaze lingered on the forest. "You need to be careful. Things like that don't usually interact with humans. She chose to, but there's a reason she did. That mine, the experiments, the darkness beneath this forest, it isn't gone. Not entirely." Mara felt a chill, recalling the twisted mountain lion, its warped limbs, the cold, calculated ferocity in its eyes. Even as the lioness had saved them, something deeper, darker still lingered, buried in the shadows of Red Rock's outskirts. But for now, that fear was secondary to relief, gratitude, and the warmth of her daughter's small body pressed to her chest. Ellie looked up at her, voice trembling. "Mommy, we're home." "Yes, baby," Mara whispered, tears streaming freely. "We're home, and we're safe." They reached the small family home on the edge of town. Mara opened the door and stepped inside, feeling a mix of relief and lingering tension. Ellie scampered forward, dropping her small blue sandal on the floor, the one that had survived the tunnels and the forest. She ran into her room, clutching her stuffed rabbit as if it were a shield against the memory of terror. Mara followed, sitting on the edge of the bed, holding Ellie close. "I promise, baby, nothing will hurt you here." Ellie leaned against her mother's shoulder, quiet for a long moment. She saved me," the child whispered. "The lioness, she's real, right?" Mara stroked her hair gently. Yes, baby, she's real and brave, and she saved us. Hours later, as the sun climbed higher and the world returned to its usual rhythm, Mara, Drew, and Ellie sat together in the small living room, the weight of exhaustion and terror settling into quiet reflection. Mara gazed out the window toward the tree line, half expecting the golden lioness to appear again, tapping softly at the glass, a silent sentinel. Drew broke the silence. You know, when we tell people what happened, no one will believe it. Mara smiled faintly, though her eyes were wet. They don't have to, we know, and Ellie knows, and that's what matters. Ellie's small voice piped up from the corner of the room. Mommy, will she come to see me again? Mara hugged her tightly. Maybe, baby. If she ever feels we need her, I think she will. But even if she doesn't, she's always with us, in our hearts and our courage. As the family embraced, Mara felt a subtle movement in the corner of her eye. Outside the window, among the trees of the distant forest, a golden shape crouched, watching. The lioness. Her eyes gleamed in the sunlight like molten gold. She tilted her head once, almost knowingly, then vanished into the shadows as silently as she had appeared. Mara's chest tightened with awe and gratitude. She knew, with a certainty that defied logic, that their lives had been forever touched by something extraordinary. A guardian who had bridged the wild and the human, intelligence and instinct, courage and love. The experience had changed them all. Ellie, once a frightened child, now carried a flicker of awe in her eyes, a sense of wonder for the impossible. Mara, exhausted yet unbroken, felt an unshakable connection to the natural world, to the unexpected guardians that roam unseen. Drew, who had faced terror and uncertainty, seemed quieter, reflective, but resolute. He had witnessed the impossible and survived. Days turned into weeks, but the memory of the golden lioness remained vivid. Mara found herself waking at odd hours, staring toward the forest, listening for the faint tap of claws on glass, the soft rumble of a growl that seemed almost human. The world had expanded for her in those hours of terror, beyond the ordinary into the wild, into the extraordinary. And somewhere in the forest, the golden lioness roamed, silent and vigilant, a guardian unseen but always watching. Mara finally understood the truth of what had happened. Some beings exist to protect, to guide, and to intervene in the moments when the world seems most cruel. Some lives, no matter how ordinary they seem, are touched by the extraordinary. She held Ellie close, smiling through tears, feeling the child's warmth, the pulse of life, and the memory of terror fading into gratitude. We're safe now, she whispered again, and we'll always remember, always. And outside, in the distant forest, Golden Eyes watched quietly, patiently, waiting, a silent guardian ready to intervene when the world called for courage once more.